بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. Hello my dear students, hello and welcome. Again, I meet you here to discuss chapter number 8, which is about Marxism as you see. But before we go to discuss Marxism, let me remind you about the previous lecture, which was talking about the feminism. Feminism, if you remember, we talked together about the definition of feminism and also the feminism as a term which can be used to describe political, cultural, or economic. And also we talk about the historical background of feminism. Also, I told you about how historical feminism can be divided into three waves. The first, the second, and the third, which in 19th and the 20th century. All these things we discussed and together told about it. Also, if you remember, we talk about Virginia Woolf. How she changed the representation of feminism in publications of her in 1920, and also we talk about her involvement with the contemporary women's movements. Also, all these things we covered in a previous lecture. And we talk about the important questions in this or in this lecture. So today I'm going to tell you what we mean by Marxism and how Marxism it changed the century. Now look at the content here. First of all, I'll tell you about the introductions of this term. And after that, we will discuss the historical developments of Marxism, third, Russian and Marxism, and also finally here, methodology as you see. All these we will cover in this lecture. So let me, before we go to the first slide, telling you about what is Marxism. What we mean by Marxism before we go to the first slide. Marxism is a method. We consider Marxism is a method that uses in interpretations of historical developments, better known as a historical materialism, to understand the class relations and social conflicts, as well as uh, also a perspective to view social transformations. So it originates from the works of 19th century German philosophy by German philosophers, which called Karl Marx and Werner Engel. These by these philosophers we are going to discuss together as Marxism and how developed or they develop over time into various branches and schools of thought. There is currently no single definitive Marxist theory will be. So let us go here to the first slides together and see and answer about this question: what is Marxism? Marxism, as you see here, is a social, political, and economic philosophy named after Karl Marx. It examines the effect of capitalism on labor productivity and economic developments and argues for worker revolutions to overturn capitalism in favor of communism. So, Marxism posits that the struggle between social classes and specifically between the bourgeoisie or capitalist here and the proletariat or workers defines economic relations in a capitalist economy and will inevitably lead to revolutionary communism. So here we can see that Marxism is both. We can see that Marxism is both a social and political theory. A social and political theory. How? Which we can say or can encompasses Marxist class conflict theory and Marxism or Marxian economics So Marxism here was first formulated in the 1848. In 1848, pamphlets the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, as we say just now, and Friedrich Engels, which lays uh, out the theory of a class struggle and revolution. So therefore, Marxian economics focus here on the circumstance of capitalism, which Karl Marx wrote about in his 1859 books Das Kapital, which is named Das Kapital. So historical developments, if we want to talk about it, or before we talk about historical development, we should understand what is the definitions or how we can define Marxism. As you see, first of all, it is very important to know that it is about social, political, and economic philosophy, which named by Karl Marx, as we say. Here we have 4 points on Marxism. There are 4 points on Marxism. The first is Marx was a man. Marx was a man. Marxism is an ideology. Marx was not against capitalism. This is number 2. Number 3, Marx's predictions about the futures haven't come true. Keep it in mind also, again, Marx's predictions about the futures haven't come true. The fourth, Marxism offers us a way to understand literature through its critical style, sociological methods, and material idea. So these 4 points you have to read more and more in order to understand the major 4 points on Marxism. Now let us go and talk about the historical development of Marxism. Before we talk about the historical development, we have to understand the life of Karl Marx. As you see, Karl Heinrich Marx was born on May 5th, 1818, in the rare kingdom of Prussia. He was German philosopher, economist, socialist, historian, journalist, and also revolutionary socialist. The third here, he followed his father's footsteps. How? The reasons that why he pursued a secular education. Now, four, he enrolled in University of Bonn as a law student, and after a year he transferred in University of Berlin, where he became interested in philosophical views. Finally, he joined the Hegelian group. So this is, we can say, autobiography about the Karl Marx, which you have to know and understand his characters in order to understand his philosophy and his methods. Now, if we want to talk about the historical development here, first of all of this tier, Marxism has flourished in the 19th century as a pragmatic view of history that offered the working classes an opportunity to change their world and their individual life. So here I can say that Marxism here uses a materialist method. Marxism uses a materialist methodology. Methodology why? To refer to by Marx and Engels as the materialist conceptions of history, and later better known as historical materialism, to analyze the underlying causes of social development, and also to change from the perspective of the collective ways in which humans make their living. So Marx here accounts of the theory is the German ideology in 1845, and in the perfect contributions here of politicals, all these things features as features of a society are assumed to stem from economic activity, forming what is considered as the base and super structures. So here we have to understand the second thing, that Marx's literary theory has its root in the 19th century. Writing of German social critic and philosopher by Karl Heinrich Marx in 1818 up to 1883. And finally here, Marxist literary criticism doesn't develop until the 20th century. So together with Marx and Engels, co-developed here communist theory. So Marx and Engels first met in September, I think exactly in 1844, and discovering that they had similar views of philosophy and socialism. So therefore, they collaborated and wrote works such as Dear Family, the Holy Family, I mean here. And after Marx was departed from France in January 1845, they moved to Belgium, which then permitted or a greater freedom of expression than other European countries. So in January 1846, they returned to Persia to establish the Communist Correspondence Committee. So therefore, you have to understand the relationship between Marx and Engels here, and how they co-developed communist theory, how they work with each other, how they know each other in order to understand their philosophy and their also methods. So here, let us go to Russia and Marxism. Russia and Marxism, as you see, uh, Benkov here. Blenkov is the founder. We consider him as the founder of the Russian Social Democratic Party, and is considered by some scholars also to be the founder of Russian Marxism. In his writing, Blinknov here argues that a great historian, great historical, let me say, figures such as Napoleon Bonaparte appears in history only when an interact web of social conditions directly facilitating their development. So every gifted here person who affects society is a product of such social, let me say, relations. So also artists here asserts Bliknov here best serve society and promote social betterment when their art interest. So therefore, before the Russian revolutions of 1917, Communist Party here leaders insisted that literature promote the standards set forth by the party. So this is what we mean here by Russian and Marxism. And before we go to the final slices here, let me also tell you that the use of the term Marxism, you have to know, denote a certain doctrine gives which gives rise to complicated problems. For example, if Marxism is used in its widest and most political sense as it is by the leaders of the Soviet Union, then everything that has happened in the Soviet Union in 1917 could be brought under the headings of Marxism in Russia. And also a paper on this subject would amount to a historical of Soviet power much more than to the historical of certain idea. The much more modest aim of this study or this subject is to look at the views of Marx and Engels in their relation to Russia first, both in the way in which in the formative years of the Russian revolutionary movements, Marx and Engels understood this movement, and in the way in which the Russian revolutionaries, when they first became acquainted with the ideas of Marx and Engels, were influenced by them and attempted to interpret them in relations to their own situations. So this is how or what is the relation between Russian here and Marxism. You have to keep and understand all these things. When you read also your syllabus or material, you will find all these things is important. Now, finally, here we will talk about the methodology. In methodology, what we have, as you see here, first of all, as an approach to literary analysis, uh, Marxism methodology is a dynamic process. This is first that maintains that a proper critique of a text can't exist in isolations from the cultural situations in which the text evolves. Oh, then necessarily Marxists argue that the study of literatures and the study of society are intricate or complicated. I mean here bound. What can we say here? We can say that in this slice, or by placing the text in its historical context and by analyzing the author's view of life, Marxist critics here arrives at one of their chief concerns. Firstly, ideology, which is expressed by the authors as evidence through his or her fictional world, and how this ideology interacts with the reader's personal ideology are what interested these critics. This is the first. And also here, the second, as you see, a Marxist critic may begin such an analysis by elucidating how the author's text reflects the writer's ideology through an examination of the fictional worlds, characters, settings, societies, or any other aspects of the text. So, studying the literary or aesthetic qualities of a text must here include, I mean, the dynamic relationship of that text to history and to economic means of productions and consumptions that helped create the text and the ideologies of the authors and the readers. Finally, here I can say or conclude that whatever method the critic chooses, a Marxist approach exposes the dominant classes, demonstrates how the bourgeoisie ideology controls and oppresses the working class and highlight those elements of society most affected by such oppressions. Such an analysis hopes the Marxist critic will lead to action, social change, revolutions, and the eventual rise of socialism. This is everything about the term of Marxism, about the definitions of Marxism, about the let me say Russian and Marxism, and also the historical developments which we covers, and finally the methodology and how it can change or can play an important role in these methods. This is everything about this subject. And before we finish or end this lecture, let me also tell you something about the, let me say, practical criticism, which we will go to a new literary criticism. I mean here, Big Millions as a play by George Bernard Shaw. You have to prepare this play and read the need, which I mean here, authors. You should understand and read some autobiography, I mean here, by the authors. And the second is the origins of Big Millions as the play. And also we will discuss or speak about the critical discussing here of the play act 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, there are 5 acts here. We will discuss next class, I mean, or in the classes or in lecture. Also, you have to look about the main characters and finally the conclusion. I mean here by conclusion types of the play. Here the types of the play. So all these things we will discuss together inside the classes, inshallah, next week. And before we discuss it, you should read and revise it, prepare everything or questions about the appearance of, for example, Elisa's father in Act 2, why he appeared in Act 2, and what he changed in his appearance. You can also study they discuss Pygmalions as the title or as a play of idea. As a play of idea, you have to read and discuss inside the classes, or also you have to look at the theme and transform, which is present in this play, transformations, transfigurations, all these pictures, all these as a plot, also as a summary, as structures, as points of view. You should read and prepare some questions in order to answer next classes. So here I'm coming to, or we come to finish this lecture. Until I meet you, let me say goodbye and see you.